Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, Wells Fargo, Georgian Court University, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, founded by the Jewish community, New Jersey Sharing Network, the Russell Berry Foundation, making a difference, NJM Insurance Group, serving New Jersey's drivers, homeowners, and business owners for more than 100 years. Gibbons PC. With 200 attorneys, Gibbons is a full-service law firm focused on handling major matters for mid-market companies and mid-market matters for Fortune 500 companies. And by St. Joseph's Health, world-class care just around the corner. Promotional support provided by Meadowlands Chamber, building connections, driving business growth. And by NJ Biz, providing business news for New Jersey for more than 30 years, online, in print, and in person.
This is One-on-One. I'm an equal American just like you are.
The jobs of tomorrow are not the jobs of yesterday.
Look at this. You got this?
Here it is, man. Look at that.
Life without dance is boring.
I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are, there is always something to learn.
Do you enjoy talking politics?
No.
People call me because they feel nobody's paying attention.
Our culture, I don't think, has ever been tested the way it's being tested right now.
That's a good question. High five.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. We are at the NJEA Convention. It is the 166th time the NJEA has come down to do this convention. We happen to be in the convention center in Atlantic City. So what's going to happen here? We'll be speaking to educators, officers of the NJEA, a whole range of folks. Like our kids who are in the public schools, they say, oh, it's the teachers' convention. Well, the NJEA convention is a lot more than that. The theme this year, social justice. They'll be talking about race relations. We'll be talking about technology, a whole range of issues that impact not just those who educate our kids, but those students, our public schools. Everything you ever wanted or needed to know about education, about our educators, but ultimately about the things that affect our students in our public schools. The 2019 NJEA Convention from right here in Atlantic City. Steve Adubato here in Atlantic City for the NJEA Convention. It is the 166th time they've been coming down here, and my neighbor, that's not why he's here. He's here because he's the vice president of the NJEA, Sean Spiller. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Great to see you.
By the way, we were just talking before we got in the air. You know a little bit about not just teaching and being an executive with this organization, about parenting. You were just sharing.
We got the little guy at home, 21 and a half, 22 months. So
what's that like?
It's wonderful. Wonderful. Enjoying every day. A lot of energy, but love it all.
Let's jump into some big issues. The theme here at the NJEA Convention, social justice. Why now? Why social justice?
It's about everything we've done. We've been so intentional about everything that we've been incorporating into our convention, but everything we've been doing with our partnerships, with our work as educators to talk about social justice, figure out A, what that means to everybody, B, how do we do that in a way that is inclusive, how do we do that in a way that's intentional about what we're trying to accomplish, which is really lead a conversation about why this matters for student success. And when we get to that point, I think it's moving us forward where we can really better serve our students.
But Sean, do us a favor, be more specific in connecting, well, what the connection is between social justice and our public school students?
Oh, there's probably a million different ways, but for example, some of our students who spoke yesterday, they were in a spot in high school where they did not feel that race was part of the conversation and such a big part of their experience of what they had to deal with in some instances, but really the perspective they came from in other instances was never discussed, never acknowledged, never incorporated into what they were learning, never made real. And I think that's important for us to acknowledge and recognize as educators, that we have to talk about that, we have to understand that in order for us to be effective.
Let me make it even more complicated for you. To what degree, in your view, Sean, is talking about, quote, race and race relations more difficult or not in the age of our president, Donald Trump? Or is it not relevant?
Yeah, it's relevant. I think that adds a layer to this. It's always a difficult conversation, I think. People...
But it's also, quote, the post-President Obama period as well.
Yes, it is.
Historic, significant, then and now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think now that we finally at least recognize, I think, that we have to talk about it. I think, unfortunately, in the broader context is what we see now. It's put into a perspective that comes from You're almost in one camp or another. It's almost viewed as an attack or not. And
How polarized
that's a shame.
are we?
Quite polarized, unfortunately. But I think when we get down to the basic level, when we talk about us as neighbors, as you noted when we started, we're not that different. I think that's where we come back to. That's what we draw from. And when we talk about our personal experiences, I think it brings us back together.
So you're confident that we can talk?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In the context of that, the Amistad Commission, first of all, make it clear what that is and then tie it into an announcement that's actually being made today here at the convention. It's embargoed as we speak, but by the time this airs, it will be made public. The Amistad Commission is what, and what is happening with it?
Great. Amistad Commission really is talking about race more broadly, but certainly our experience as a country with slavery.
That's right.
Where we were, where we've come, how we've done on that journey, where we need to go. Much like the Holocaust Commission or other entities that exist here in New Jersey, their goal, their focus.
And you've taken some trips.
I have. I've done a trip with the Holocaust Commission,
right.
All through Europe, shared some of those experiences with a child survivor. Unbelievably powerful, and really we wanted to capture that same experience for those educators who wanted to know what that was like with slavery, figure out how they're going to incorporate that into lessons, connect that to their students, and we're talking about making a big announcement today about a trip to do the same type of thing.
With the Amistad Commission?
With the Amistad Commission, yes.
I'm curious about this. For those who say, hey, wait a minute, shouldn't the NJEA Convention in Atlantic City, let me disclose, by the way, the NJEA is a significant supporter of our programming and underwriter of our programming in public broadcasting. For those who say, hey, wait a minute, I thought that the teachers' convention was where they would go down there for a couple of days and then to learn new ways to teach. More than that.
Way more than that. First, it's all of us as educators, which is so important. It takes all of us to do this great work to get #1 schools in the nation.
By the way, get your educational background, your teaching background out of the way.
Yeah, sure. High school science teacher.
Where?
In Wayne, New Jersey, and just love every second of it. But I also know it really was a partnership. You know, as my in-class support teacher, it's all of us, even the custodians helping out, making sure I had what I needed. But that is why we have the best schools in the nation, first and foremost. But all of us as educators are down here, yes, for professional growth, professional development, but that includes race, that includes social justice, that includes talking about these important issues. I think for too long we've kind of put that as a separate piece, and it doesn't work when we do that. It's hanging there, it's all around us, and if we don't acknowledge it, we're, I think, doing a disservice to our students. It is difficult. It's difficult until we really break through that barrier, that this doesn't have to be a conversation that's approached from a negative. It's a conversation, I think, that we approach, as the title you started with suggested. It's about love, but what does love look like? It's us talking about these important issues. It's us getting through them to make sure we're connecting with each other.
That's Sean Spiller. He's the Vice President of the New Jersey Education Association. We're in Atlantic City. Thank you, Sean.
It's good to see you.
Appreciate it. Steve Adubato here at the 2019 NJEA Convention. You can see that the young lady next to me, she's the Teacher of the Year. That's why she's waving to people. She is Kimberly Dickstein Hughes, 2019-20 New Jersey State Teacher of the Year, English teacher at
Haddonfield Memorial High School.
Look at you mugging to the camera. By the way, congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. Why don't we walk a little bit?
Yes, yeah.
Let's talk to me about when you found out that you were the Teacher of the Year. Further, how do you even find out?
So, well, first you're announced as your County Teacher of the Year.
Go ahead.
So I was announced Camden County Teacher of the Year in August. It's a great honor to represent Camden County because I'm a product of Camden County.
Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Voorhees Township, and my parents still live there. And I went to Voorhees Township neighborhood schools, then I went to Eastern Regional, then I went to Rutgers University.
Same here.
Nice.
Not at the same time.
And then
It's not that funny.
few
It's
years in between.
So come on. So you get out of Rutgers.
Correct.
And you decide, I want to go into education, or did you know early on that's what you wanted to do?
So I knew early on at Rutgers College that I wanted to become a teacher. I was told my whole life to go into law and policy. I was in Model UN, student government, and when I got to Rutgers, I was in a first-year interest group for law, and I just didn't feel like it was a perfect fit at the moment. And I was...
Law did not speak to you.
It didn't speak to me because I wanted to be with people. And I realized that if I was in law, I'd be with legislation. And I know that moves, but I also know that you can move every day in a classroom.
So how long has it been you've been teaching?
11 years.
So I'm curious about this. You go into teaching, right? You could have made more money doing other things,
Correct.
right? Obviously, whether it's law or whatever else. But you get into teaching, and is it what you thought it would be?
Absolutely not.
Go ahead.
It's because when you go to school for education. You're learning a lot about how to teach content. And what I learned pretty early on is that you're teaching human beings, not content.
Talk about that.
Every single day, you have X amount of students entering your classroom, and you don't know what's coming in. You know what you're delivering, and I know I have X lesson on Euripides Medea, and we're talking about emotion and human response, and then the magic happens, and human beings bring that to life. But you don't know what they come in with every single day. And so I learned so early, like day one, that you have to teach humanity. And to me, that's a game changer. You can't put any dollar amount on how important that is.
The area of global citizenship, a big theme for you. You took this 6-month sabbatical that you are about to take.
January.
The theme, lift every voice in New Jersey.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Great question. So Lift Every Voice New Jersey is about sharing your access to power.
Okay.
And that we have 200,000 educators serving 1.4 million students. And we have voices beyond that who are invested in New Jersey's public schools and New Jersey's education system. And we have to make sure that we hear them. So for me, what that means is that I take that 6-month sabbatical and do everything in my power to lift every voice who wants to be heard.
Congratulations.
Thank
and I
you
also
very
know
much.
you have more work to do.
Yeah, we do.
And I know you're going to keep making a big difference. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
To see more one-on-one with Steve Adubato programs, visit us online at steveadubato.org. If you would like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato PhD and follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato.
Welcome to the 2019 NJEA, New Jersey Education Association Convention, where we're talking all sorts of leaders in education, educators, and one of them is right in front of me. He is Josh Langenberger. He's a science teacher at Howell Middle School South. You've been teaching science for about 20 years.
Yes.
And overall teaching for how long?
26 years.
Now, you've been recognized. Some of the folks we're talking to here are winners of this Frederick L. Hipp Foundation Grant Award. And you won a Hipp Award for?
Project HEAT.
Project HEAT.
Yes.
H-E-A-T.
Yep.
Stands for?
Hypothesizing about energy through the analysis of temperature.
It rolls right off the tongue. Break it down for us, because you brought some props here, and I have a sense they're connected to Project HEAT.
Absolutely. So what I wanted to do with this grant is.
By the way, we should make it clear that the Frederick L. Hipp Foundation Grant is awarded to educators for excellent ideas, innovation in the classroom, and Frederick Hipp, a very important person in the history of the NJEA. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's all right. What I wanted to do with students is, in my own science classroom, we've traditionally used thermometers, the bulb thermometers, to measure temperature.
Sounds reasonable.
It is. And what I found is that as students are gathering data, the data tends to be a little inaccurate. So as a result, their conclusions, you can't form strong conclusions with weak data. So the idea behind the grant was to give the students the tools, the same tools that scientists use, to analyze temperature or the heat and the transfer of energy. So what I was able to do with the grant was to purchase a series of probes, thermal
probes, go ahead.
And so they interface with the students' laptops and are able to graph, both in table and graph form, visualize and represent changes in temperature.
Where?
Excellent question. So I had students create these tiny houses, and what they were charged with is making sure that the inside of their house stayed cool.
This is the house that is covered with?
This house is covered with aluminum foil.
And this is just a cardboard house?
It is a cardboard house.
Okay, break it down for us.
All right. Well, what students would do is in this particular instance, they wanted to take a heat source that I placed over here representing the sun in the summertime, and their goal was to keep their house cool by simply reflecting the heat away. So what I would do is I'd have a series of 2 probes. One that would be placed inside the house.
Go ahead.
And the other that would be outside, so that students could compare the temperature of the sun with the internal temperature of their house to see how successful they were at keeping it cool. Now, students were also able to design other solutions to the problem. I left this tiny house open.
What's the problem?
Well,
you said solution to the problem. What's the problem?
Well, the problem is they got to keep their house cool in the summertime. So they have to select the right insulation. And so the students have come up with some amazing solutions. The one that I actually had to limit was one student said, well, why don't we just take a bag of ice and place the ice inside the tiny house?
Just put the ice in the cardboard
Just put the
house.
tiny house inside the...
And why wouldn't that work?
Oh, it did work. It was air conditioning.
Okay.
But unfortunately, the solution I was looking for is to have students really understand what insulators do at preventing the transfer of energy. And so with the data they were able to collect with the thermal probes, they were able to see how effective their solutions were. This is a thermal camera.
A thermal camera?
Thermal camera.
Which is?
What people use when they're analyzing your house for heat loss. So they would go up and they take a picture of your house and they look for gaps in the structure itself or gaps in insulation, and those are areas they would fix. So by using the thermal camera, students were able to also have a picture of their house to determine where their inefficiencies were in their insulation and be able to fix that problem.
Josh, you have an absolutely great attitude, and those of us who have a child in a public school, they would be fortunate to have you as their science teacher. So thank you for what you do every day for so many students.
My pleasure.
Hi, Steve Adubato at the 2019 NJEA Convention. You might be able to see behind us before I introduce Steve Swetsky, the Executive Director of the New Jersey Education Association. Governor Murphy's in the house, as they say. Hey, Governor, how you doing?
All right, buddy.
Good to see you. How's everything?
Good to see you, buddy.
You with the team?
I'm with the team.
Governor. Everything good?
Everything's great.
NJEA, all right?
NJEA is top of the tops.
Thank Murray, you agree?
Yeah, 100%,
come on.
yes.
Good to see what happens. Thank you so much, Governor. Appreciate it. Well done. Sean, all the best. That's what happens when you're here live in Atlantic City at Convention Center. So, by the way, why don't we start with Governor Murphy? The relationship of the New Jersey Education Association with Governor Murphy is?
A breath of fresh air. He's been a partner. He just actually spoke to 1,000 of our members who were at a session with Dr. Cornel West.
So he was there for that big event.
He came up, he spoke, he talked about what he talked to our members about 3 years ago when he was here, when he was running for office. And everything he spoke about then is the partnership that we've been able to develop.
See, if I ask you about 2020, top 2 or 3, dare I call them agenda items, let me disclose this, by the way, the New Jersey Education Association is an underwriter of the work that we do with Caucus Educational Corporation and a supporter of our colleagues and partners at NJTV News. Top agenda items are?
Working with our members around social justice issues, economic justice issues, really starting to take a look at not just what happens in a classroom or what happens in a particular school, but what happens in communities. What are the things happening in communities that drive what happens in those schools?
Let's break this down a little bit. The theme of social and economic justice, a big theme here at the 166th New Jersey Education Association Convention. Break that down. What does that mean in terms of education, our educators and our students?
So I think typically, unions typically focus kind of on, those collective bargaining issues, right? The wages, the working conditions.
And dare we talk about pensions, which we will in a moment. Go ahead.
we could add in pensions and health benefits.
But those are the basic issues. But where does this come in?
So if you look around, if you look at communities, if you talk about student success and what drives student success, it's not simply what happens within a particular school, right? It's the out-of-school factors, right, that we talk about but nobody really focuses on. So how do we look at what's happening in those communities? How do we get our members involved with working with community members to drive those conversations around the social and economic issues, jobs, right, medical care, all of those pieces that, students step into our classroom and they're in our schools for 7 or 8 hours a day. They're someplace else for the rest of the day, and if where they are, it isn't meeting their needs, we need to talk about those things.
You can't say that's separate from what we do in the classroom. That's
it's
not
all
really.
connected.
It is connected.
Yeah.
As it relates to recruiting and retaining teachers, is it harder to keep, particularly the best teachers, harder?
People come into education, they have a passion for it. They want to work with kids.
They know they're
right?
not getting rich.
And so they come into it with that belief that they're coming into something that's valued, right? And the value, how those things are kind of measured, the value of it is how they're treated, right? And Governor Murphy's a good example of that.
But I also want to say this, sorry for interrupting, Steve. We also just finished an interview with the Teacher of the Year, Kimberly. She obviously could have made more money doing other things. She's one of the best teachers you'll ever meet.
She's unbelievable, and she has a passion for the work, the passion for the students, a passion for her community.
Steve Swetsky is the executive director of the New Jersey Education Association. He took over in August of 2019.
Yep.
Okay, and we look forward to talking to you in the future about a range of education issues. Thank you, Steve.
I look forward to that. Thank you very much.
All the best. It is our honor to introduce one of the many educators who are here, Stephanie Boyd, speech language specialist at Whiting Elementary School. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. We're actually talking to educators and others who are engaged in this annual convention here in Atlantic City with the NJEA. Stephanie, you are part of a group of people who are working on hydroponic gardening. And this initiative has just won what is called the Frederick Hipp Foundation Grant Award, named after Frederick Hipp. You should look him up on the NJEA website. What is the grant for?
We wrote the grant for 3 hydroponic garden towers, 1 composting vertical garden tower for outdoors, and for kids' cooking equipment. We basically wanted to start a program where we were harvesting vegetables and fruit and getting the students involved with producing, harvesting, cutting everything. And our school is unique in which we have the autism program for the district in our elementary school. So we have a special set of students that we really need to focus our attention on for life skills, and that's really where we were coming. We were starting with the grant. We were trying to really incorporate as many life skills and communication abilities as we could.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I want to be clear on a couple things. First of all, I am remiss. I should have asked, what is hydroponic gardening?
Okay.
Then we're going to make the connection back to the students who participate, students who are on the autism spectrum, if you will, as well as other students who are working with them. What is hydroponic gardening?
Okay, well, hydroponic gardening is gardening without the use of dirt. It's really interesting.
Is it water? Are they in water?
Water.
Plants are in water.
They're in little pots that have wool, and then there's vermiculite, which is in the middle, which holds the seeds, and then every 45 minutes, the water rains down. The pump pulls it up to the top, and it rains down on the roots for 15 straight minutes, and that's on a continuous cycle. And we also have LED lights that are inside, just because they're not outdoors, and they do need a light source.
So let's go back to the students. Why is it so important that this program focuses on not just hydroponic gardening, engaging students who are on the autism spectrum, but you argue that you're teaching them life skills?
Yes.
Like?
Cutting things, which seems very basic, and most kids just learn that very easily through their typical development, but something like cutting appropriately, or just the language that you can get from doing any kind of cooking. We had our first harvest recently, so we were cutting all of the lettuce from one of the towers, and then the students were we have tomatoes in our garden, probably not now because of the weather, but...
We're doing this as it approaches winter, but go ahead.
Yes, so we had tomatoes from outside, so the students were practicing holding it and saying up, down, cutting. They're practicing their language skills, and they're actually working on something that they will need as a skill for life, which is really important. We're trying to just really boost their life skills in general.
What's it like for you, Stephanie, to see these students growing, learning, and beginning to reach their potential?
It's amazing. And actually, they're really impressing us with things that they're actually showing us that they can do, and things that we thought they wouldn't do, like try a tomato or try a piece of lettuce. The students are actually surprising us. We have a student that does not like, he has a sensory issue that he doesn't like to touch anything that is wet or slimy or gooey, and he was actually chopping tomatoes, and he actually tasted them too, and he didn't like them. He didn't like them,
But that's progress.
Yes.
For these students who are, again, on the autism spectrum, they go through this program. They're learning, they're growing, they're challenging themselves. What does it do to set them up for the rest of their lives to be the most productive, but also the happiest people they can be?
I really think that what we have in place right now is really instilling some good communication abilities, practice, and life skills so that they can continue and show a lot of progress in the future.
Stephanie, I want to thank you for joining us here at the NJEA Convention. As I said, we're talking to educators, people who are making a difference every day, and those who are particularly innovative have won this Frederick L. Hipp Foundation Grant Award. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, Wells Fargo, Georgian Court University, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, New Jersey Sharing Network, the Russell Berry Foundation, NJM Insurance Group, Gibbons PC, and by St. Joseph's Health. Promotional support provided by Meadowlands Chamber and by NJ Biz. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.
Autism is one of the fastest growing developmental disorders in the U.S. Here in New Jersey, 1 in every 41 children is diagnosed with autism. And when a child is diagnosed with autism, every member of the family is affected. While there currently is no cure for autism, early detection and intervention can offer critical improvements for the child and tremendous benefits for the family. To learn more about autism, contact the Binder Autism Center at St. Joseph's Children's Hospital.